What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Python for Absolute Beginners video. Mitch, Viking Dev, whatever you want to call me. Today we're going to be talking about functions. There's a little bit of house cleaning that we've got to do up before we start talking about functions, but we are going to jump right into functions in this video. So first, we've been running everything from a certain kind of mode that you wouldn't typically use if you're writing bigger programs, and we're going to start writing bigger programs. So right now we're running everything through interactive mode. That means as soon as I type a line and press enter, then it runs that line of code. If I were to write another one, so if I were to print out something like this, or if I were to do a +5, then it would run each line individually. Now that's fine for just understanding variables, different things like that, understanding arrays like we did in the last video, but we're going to start writing more complex kind of code. We're going to start writing functions, and you can write functions within interactive mode, but it's not the best way to do things. So we're going to start running things out of individual files. I've got an example pulled up right here. Let me pull it up. So I've got an example right here. It is nothing new. It is stuff that we've already covered. We've got a = 7, b = 5, c = a + b. Now this is all sitting in its own file. If you look up here at the top, you'll see functions.py is what I've decided to name that file. It's the exact same thing as writing stuff into a text file and saving it that way. Same exact concept, except this time we're writing code. Now, we're going to start talking about some kind of syntactical stuff. That means that there are specific rules that you have to follow in order to actually get everything to run the way that you want it to run. So Python is a language that cares a lot about indentation, as we'll see here in a second. So you have to make sure that you're indenting things properly as you write them. So the thing about running things from files instead of running them in interactive mode is I don't have to press enter after each one of these lines. Each one of these lines is going to run in the order that you see it in, but you don't have to type them all separately, if that makes sense at all. We'll actually see this here in a second. So if we press run, we run our module and we type in a = 7, b = 5, c = 12. So it's the exact same thing, and we can interact with all of these variables in interactive mode if we really wanted to, but first it runs all 3 lines of code, just like this. Now, let's start talking about functions. We're going to write a dead simple function, but before that, let's talk about what functions are. Functions are basically ways that you can divide your code up into tasks. Each function is supposed to have a specific task. So let's say if you had one function that specifically printed out certain variables or did certain mathematical things to an input variable. Functions have inputs, which are parameters, and they have outputs, which are return variables. You can return anything you want from a function, or you can return nothing from a function. That would be called a void function. But the basic parts of a function are parameters and output variables, or return variables. So the best way to learn functions is to go ahead and write one. Let's go ahead and write a function, and you start a function definition with def for definition. Then you have your function name. We're going to call this sum. Let's say sum vars. Then you will have 2 parentheses and a colon. So after this, if you press enter and you're using idle like I am, it's going to automatically indent it. Like I was saying before, Python cares a lot about indentation. You have to make sure that you remember your indentation. The reason why Python cares about indentation is that each function has a scope. Each function's scope is going to contain that function's variables. So you're not going to be able to share variables across functions in exactly the same way as you would typically think. So let's make some vars, and we're going to have a = 15, b = 17, and we are going to return, which is basically saying after this function runs, we are going to return or give the user back this value, and that value is going to be a plus b. So let's run this function. Let's erase all of that. Let's run this function by writing the function name, sum vars, and then two parentheses. Up here, you see the function definition. Down here, we are actually calling that function. So let's save it. And we're going to press run module, and we get nothing. Let's try that again. So if we do it in interactive mode, we get sum vars, and press enter. We get 32. Now, why did it not do it the first time? The reason is when we run all of this not in interactive mode, then basically the compiler or what actually runs your program doesn't know what to do with sum vars. What we would typically do if we wanted to print out the value, like we saw here, we've got 32 printed out here. That is running the function through interactive mode. So by default, it goes ahead and prints out your return variable. If you're not running in interactive mode, it's not going to print it out by default. We actually have to explicitly print it. The way you do that is with another function. Print a plus b, save, and run. So it automatically prints it this time. And the reason why is that we have called the print function. And what we've done within the print function is we have passed it a parameter. This parameter is a plus b. So first, what Python is going to do is it's going to run this mathematical equation. It's going to run a plus b. Then it's going to pass whatever that value is. We saw 32. It's going to pass it to print, and print is going to be what actually prints it out to the screen. So from now on, anytime you want something to print out, explicitly call the print function. So we've got sum vars, and now we've learned that we can pass in parameters. What could we do to kind of change this function around? Instead of having a and b here, let's pass a and b in as parameters. So a, b. So now we call sum vars, and we're going to call it with a equals 17 and b equals 74. We run this, and we get 91. Now, here's what we're doing. All we're doing is saying, hey, I would like to call this function. So it's going to look up above, and it's going to try to figure out what the definition of that function is. And it's going to say when it's looking for parameter A is equal to 17. If it's looking for parameter B is equal to 74. Now, you can completely get rid of this A and this B. And because of the order that it's in, it's going to say, okay, A is first, so A is equal to 17, and B is second, so B is equal to 74. So you don't have to explicitly put them there. I typically don't, just because it kind of saves some time, and I have been coding for a while, so I know that everything passes in the order that you actually have it in up here. But, you know, that it doesn't really matter. For clarity's sake, it might be better to include the A equals and B equals. Now, functions don't have to just be one line. As we saw earlier, you can have as many lines as you want in your function. So here we could do print A, then we're going to have print B, and when we run this, it's going to print 17, 74, and 91. Now, here is an issue. So if we run this right now, let's run it again, and we try to print out A. We get a name error. It's basically saying it does not know what A is. It's saying A is not defined. But if we look back at our code, we see A is right here. This is introducing the idea of locality. Every single function is going to have its own scope, its own context, or its own locality. You can kind of use those words interchangeably. Within this scope, sum vars, the function, knows about the variable A, and it knows about the variable B. But as soon as it exits, as soon as it returns, as soon as it runs that return line, A and B go out the window. No other function is going to know about A or B. So all of those variables are what's called local to that function, which means that as soon as you exit that function scope, as soon as you exit the function by returning or getting an error or just, you know, if you don't run the function at all, then that A and B are gone. So these are local variables. They are local to that function. A global variable would be something that's accessible by everything. So if we have a global variable of c is equal to 72, and we did a plus b plus c. If we were to do this and then print c, so we get here 17, which is a, 74, which is b, 163, which is a plus b plus c, and we print c. So c is a global variable. It is accessible by the script itself, which we can see right here, and it's accessible by its individual functions. That is within the entire script scope. So you can actually have as many global variables as you want, and they can be accessible by as many functions as you want. And we can define new functions as well. So def, let's do subvars. Let's do a, b. We're going to print, oop, forgot my colon. We're going to print a, print b, and we're going to return a minus b minus c. So we need to print it, and then we need to actually call it. So subvars, let's do 125, 23, and that's it because c is up above. We run this, and as we can see, we are printing a, then b. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. Run it again, and our bottommost line is going to be the result of this subvars function. So as we can see, subvars has a separate a and a separate b, but the same c as sumvars. So sumvars is going to have 17 and 74 here, and it's going to actually return the value of all three of those things summed up. Subvars is going to have 125 and 23 here, and all of those items are going to be subtracted from each other down here. So finally, the thing that you need to kind of remember here is a little bit of vocabulary. And what that vocabulary is whenever I am actually running a function, that's called calling it. So I am calling a function with these two parameters. These two are the input variables that I am sending to the function. It is eventually going to return. Here it's not returning anything, all it's doing is printing. So here it's not really returning anything, it's just printing as soon as it hits this return, but technically, I mean, it's a line that says return. That is going to be a return variable. So that is about it for this video. Not too long of one and not too confusing, I hope. It's important that you understand these foundational topics because whether you're going to continue writing in Python or you're going to write in JavaScript, C, C++, assembly, everything has functions. So it's very, very important to understand how to use functions, what they do, what the different vocabulary is for when you're Googling stuff online. It's very, very important that you understand this stuff. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I hope it was clear enough though. Take it easy. Peace.